Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision. It's like engineering.
Right. It's binary. Like you break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line, and it's obvious.
Yeah, exactly. The doctor just points at it and says, there it is, broken or not broken. It's a clean, visible categorization.
But when you step into the murky world of global intelligence, suddenly that X-ray machine is, well, it's completely broken.
Well, absolutely. We are looking at a landscape of information that is honestly an absolute mess right now.
It is the literal definition of diagnostic muddy waters. And when you're dealing with global security, or, even just trying to run a major corporation today, murky information isn't just annoying, it's actually dangerous.
It's so true. And that is why we are so excited to welcome you to this custom deep dive crafted specifically for you. Today, we are taking on this massive, vital question.
Right, the big one. In an era of absolute data overload, how do we process information and separate actual truth from weaponized noise?
To figure this out, we are looking at a truly fascinating stack of source materials today. We've got our hands on some highly advanced U.S. strategic intelligence manuals.
Specifically, we're looking at the APUSMAs and the INTL 501 and 502 guides.
Yes, and to top it off, we have the architectural blueprints for a cutting-edge training facility called the Center for Applied Cyber Epistemology and Emulation, or CCE for short.
It really is a remarkable set of documents because it outlines a fundamental structural transition in how we handle truth. We're moving completely away from traditional Cold War-style spycraft.
The intelligence community is basically relying on highly automated, deeply philosophical frameworks now to protect our critical infrastructure in our minds.
Exactly. And what's crucial here is that these aren't just tools for national security. These are high-level epistemic strategies that you can apply to your own daily information diet.
Right, to build your own cognitive resilience. Okay, so let's unpack this, because to understand where we're going, we really have to look at how the baseline of intelligence gathering has completely inverted over the last 80 years.
It's a total paradigm shift. If we look at the historical context, the modern U.S. intelligence community, or IC, was formalized by the National Security Act of 1947.
Right after World War II.
Exactly. And you have to remember the environment of that era. This entire system was designed and built for data scarcity.
They were looking for tiny hidden signals behind the Iron Curtain. It was all about finding that one piece of information no one else had.
Right, and they relied on incredibly high-risk disciplines to find those signals. Take human T, for example, human intelligence.
Spies, basically just classic espionage, right?
Yeah, the clandestine acquisition of secrets by a human collector. It gives you unparalleled insight into an adversary's true intentions, but it carries this massive inherent trust deficit.
Because humans are flawed.
Precisely. The sources outline how the community constantly had to defend against insider threats. Moles with wide access to host networks who could just betray the system.
Wow, yeah, and the manuals also talk about MAUSINT, right?
Yeah.
Measurement and signature intelligence.
MAUSINT is basically the scientific discipline of intelligence. It analyzes physical attributes. So think of things like radar signatures, nuclear radiation, or acoustic profiles of submarines.
Oh, that makes sense. So it's hard data.
It provides a technical audit trail that bypasses conventional denial and deception. But historically, it suffered from what the manuals call a secondary mission trap.
Wait, what does that mean, secondary mission trap?
Well, the sensors for MAUSINT were usually just piggybacked onto airplanes or satellites that were actually built for other primary missions.
Oh, I see. So both HUMINT and MAUSINT were these highly specialized siloed tools for a world where information was incredibly hard to get.
Exactly. But today, that is absolutely not our problem.
No, not at all. We live in a state of overwhelming data abundance now. The sources explicitly state that open source intelligence, or OSINT, is now the INT of first resort.
Right. It makes up 80 to 90% of all intelligence. The data is just sitting out there on the clear web, the deep web, and the dark web.
But that abundance is actually a huge problem, isn't it?
It's the root of what the manuals refer to as the complexity crisis. The traditional mechanism for handling intelligence was this linear cycle called TPED: tasking, processing, exploitation, and dissemination.
So you assign a task, process the raw data, an analyst exploits it to find meaning, and then you distribute the report.
Right. But applying that slow, scarcity-based management philosophy to high-velocity digital data creates a severe cognitive bottleneck. It creates these stovepipes of information where data just gets stuck.
The analysts are just drowning. The documents call it the swarm ball phenomenon. They are completely paralyzed by the sheer noise of current intelligence.
Just completely overwhelmed.
I mean, think about how you feel scrolling through your social media feed during a breaking news event. The endless contradictory updates, the fake videos, the hot takes.
It's exhausting.
Now, imagine your job is to find the one real geopolitical threat hidden inside that fire hose.
It is basically an impossible task for a human brain.
But wait, let me push back on this idea of stovepipes being a bad thing.
Yeah.
Wasn't that compartmentalization like the whole need-to-know model?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that designed specifically to protect classified sources and methods?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if you don't silo the information, don't you risk another massive insider leak? Are we saying secrecy is a liability now?
Well, compartmentalization wasn't a mistake. I mean, it saved lives. You absolutely had to protect human sources to prevent catastrophic breaches.
Right.
But the texts argue that in today's digital environment, that rigid security model has become a straitjacket. The need-to-know model creates a paralyzing awareness gap.
An awareness gap. Okay, so if the cyber defense team can't talk to the human intelligence team because of clearance silos, the organization just cannot respond to a multi-domain threat.
Exactly. The adversary is moving across networks seamlessly, while the defenders are literally waiting for permission to share a file.
Wow.
So the new doctrine demands a shift away from restrictive silos toward decentralized trusted networks, driven by a responsibility to provide ethos.
Okay, so if you have the data, it is your duty to push it out across the network instantly. Because if human analysts are trapped in this swarm ball of OSINT noise, they're missing actual incoming threats.
Right. And that brings us to the real consequence of this complexity crisis, which is something the texts call the warning response gap.
Which sounds terrifying. What exactly is that?
The warning response gap is defined as the failure of intelligence to trigger a policy response simply because there isn't enough lead time.
Oh, wow. So by the time human analysts filter the noise, verify the data, and write a cohesive report,
The cyber attack has already happened. The adversary has achieved their objective and moved on.
to close that gap, the intelligence community has to achieve what the sources call temporal parity. Basically, we have to process intelligence at the exact velocity the adversary generates it.
We have to move at the speed of the machine.
And the text mentioned this inTIME framework to speed things up. How does that actually work without human eyes on it?
So inTIME stands for Integrated Threat Intelligence Mining and Extraction. It completely removes the human from the initial triage phase.
Okay.
Let's break down how it functions. First, it uses SVM classifier support vector machines. Think of these as hyper-fast automated sorters that look at massive amounts of web data and instantly categorize it into relevant bins.
And then it applies natural language understanding, or NLU, right? So it's not just doing a keyword search, it's actually grasping the context of the text.
Exactly. It is parsing the grammatical structure and semantic meaning to autonomously extract specific entities.
That's wild.
Yeah, it can read a dark web forum and pull out a hidden malware command or a suspicious shell script without a human ever reading the post. And then finally, it formats all of this data into STIX and tax type protocols.
I see those acronyms everywhere in these manuals. What are STIX and TAXTA actually doing?
They're essentially standardized digital languages. They allow different security systems, whether it's a firewall in London or a server in Tokyo, to talk to each other and share threat data instantly, machine to machine.
Okay, so the inTIME framework operates continuously, prioritizing relevant data the moment it's ingested.
Right.
Here's where I get hung up, though. If we are just hoovering up data with AI at light speed, relying entirely on machine learning to tell us what is a threat, what happens if the adversary realizes this and starts feeding our AI bad information on purpose?
That is a very real fear.
Because speed seems like it introduces the ultimate vulnerability here.
Your concern is actually one of the primary threats outlined in the INTL 502 manual. It's a concept called data poisoning.
Data poisoning.
Yeah, when you rely on high-volume machine learning ingestion, the algorithm itself becomes a massive attack surface. Adversaries can embed sample-specific invisible triggers or backdoors into the raw data sitting on the open web.
With the goal of silently manipulating the machine learning models over time.
Exactly.
So they train our AI to ignore them. When a real threat comes along, the compromised algorithm just looks the other way.
And because the system is processing millions of data points a second, a human analyst could never spot the poisoned data manually.
All right, just too much.
If you try to mathematically verify the absolute truth of massive open source data sets, the adversary wins. They simply have too much volume.
And so what do we do?
The intelligence community had to pivot entirely. They turned away from pure mathematics and looked to philosophy.
Philosophy. Wait, really?
Yes. Specifically, they implemented the theories of Karl Popper, a 20th century philosopher of science who championed deductive falsification.
Wait, so instead of trying to verify that every piece of incoming data is perfectly true, we just assume it's false. How does that work in a software pipeline?
It acts as an epistemological shield. The system utilizes what the manuals call mismatch logic. Rather than trying to prove a synthetic narrative or a dataset is entirely true, the automated systems set a pre-falsified baseline.
Okay.
Then, they actively hunt for a single refuting contradiction.
Interesting.
For example, instead of verifying an entire 50-page document is a genuine Russian intelligence memo, the algorithm just looks for one microscopic formatting error or linguistic quirk that a real Russian system would never generate.
Ooh. And the moment it finds that mismatch, it throws the whole thing out.
Precisely.
I think I get it. So it's like, instead of trying to manually inspect every single grain of sand on the beach to ensure it's real, we've built an automated metal detector.
I like that analogy.
We just swing it over the beach, and it only screams when it hits a counterfeit grain. We aren't verifying truth. We're automating the detection of lies.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it, and this philosophy is physically coded into the software pipelines via SecMLOps.
Security machine learning operations.
Right. SecMLOps provides strict provenance tracking, meaning it records exactly where every piece of data came from. It also uses adversarial training.
Like attacking its own algorithms to find weak spots.
Yes. It basically turns the adversary's volume strategy against them. The more poisoned data the adversary pumps into the system, the higher the mathematical probability that the SecMLOps metal detector will catch a logical mismatch.
That is brilliant. But even with SecMLOps filtering out the poison, the human analysts are still bearing a massive burden.
Oh, absolutely. Because the Epistemic manual goes deep into the human toll of this transition. They talk about taking tacit knowledge like the intuition, the gut feelings, and the context locked inside a human analyst's head and trying to turn it into explicit, codified corporate rules.
And that process creates what they call epistemic friction.
Yes, and it sounds like it is literally destroying people.
The human cost documented here is severe. This friction manifests as deep emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and incredibly low professional efficacy. People feel like they are failing no matter how hard they work.
That's awful.
And when analysts burn out, you see a huge increase in attrition and, critically, insider threats. Disgruntled, exhausted employees become vulnerabilities.
Of course.
The data shows that demographics play a significant role too. For example, females in security consulting report higher emotional exhaustion, which the studies show is often exacerbated by poor industry cultural fit.
Wow.
Furthermore, analysts experiencing poor sleep quality exhibit drastically higher burnout levels across the board. Just basic biology catching up with the tech. So to save these analysts, the sources show agencies are adopting a professionalization doctrine. They are shifting to a model called intelligence as a service.
Yes. And a major part of that service model is reducing alert fatigue in the private sector. They do this using SBOM and VEX data.
Let's break those down because they sound incredibly useful for literally any IT department.
Well, an SBOM is a software bill of materials. Think of it like the ingredient list on the back of a box of cookies. It tells you exactly what open source code and components are inside a software product.
Okay, and VX?
VX stands for Vulnerability Exploitability Exchange. If the SBOM is the ingredient list, VX is the highly specific allergy warning. It tells you if a known vulnerability in one of those ingredients can actually be exploited in your specific environment.
Oh, I see. So by combining these, the government can filter out non-exploitable vulnerabilities.
Exactly. Instead of sending a private company 1,000 theoretical alerts that cause their security team to just panic, they send them the 3 alerts that actually require action.
It's all about protecting the analyst's cognitive load. But they're also obsessed with protecting the objectivity of the intelligence itself.
Very much so.
The IC enforces strict tradecraft standards, specifically Intelligence Community Directive 203, or ICD 203. Analysts are required to use the AIMS framework audience, issue, message, storyline to structure their thinking.
And they have to write in the BLUF format, which is bottom line up front.
Right. They place the most critical findings and key judgments at the very beginning of the product, totally opposite to how you'd write, say, an academic paper.
Because the goal is rapid comprehension. The policymaker needs to know the threat in the first 10 seconds of reading.
But I have to ask a provocative question here. Does forcing analysts to write in this rigid bottom line upfront format risk killing the necessary nuance of a complex global threat?
It's a huge debate.
I mean, are we oversimplifying the world just to save a policymaker's time?
It is a constant tension within the community. ICD 203 mandates objectivity and independence from political influence, but you are totally correct that condensing complex geopolitics into a BLUF inevitably trims context.
It has to.
However, the counter-argument the community makes is harsh but practical. If a policymaker doesn't immediately grasp the threat because the vital context is buried on page 4 of a dense report, the intelligence has failed its primary purpose.
It didn't provide a decision advantage.
Exactly.
And that tension isn't just internal either. It's fascinating to see how the authors of these manuals frame the external tensions. They point out a major public-private trust gap.
Yes, noting how government regulations clash with the tech sector's privacy concerns.
Right, and to be clear, we aren't taking a side here, but seeing this friction documented so openly in an intelligence manual is incredibly revealing.
It really is.
On one side, you have strict data privacy regulations like the EU AI Act and FISA constraining how intelligence agencies can use big data.
And on the other side, the government faces cultural resistance from what the manuals call techno-libertarian elements within the commercial tech sector.
People who are deeply hesitant to build tools that could be used for government surveillance.
Exactly. So to navigate that delicate ecosystem, the IC has to provide what they call verifiable technical receipts.
The technical receipts.
Yeah, by transparently mapping their analytic outputs to standardized frameworks like the NIST-NICE framework, they try to create a transparency shield to prove their objectivity to the private sector.
Okay, that makes sense. But to truly train professionals to navigate all of this, to use automated tools, avoid burnout, and manage this massive public-private friction requires a radically new type of education.
Which brings us to the final piece of our source stack.
Yes, the blueprints for KCE, the Center for Applied Cyber Epistemology and Emulation. This is where all this dense theory hits the real world.
Right.
And KC isn't just teaching IT professionals how to run a basic vulnerability scan. They are teaching social epistemology.
Social epistemology is essentially the study of how organizations, groups of people, collectively process truth.
Which is so relevant right now.
CCE is designed to teach entire organizations how to handle cognitive biases in threat analysis and how to combat institutional disinformation during a live crisis.
And they do this through 3 operational layers, all running on a Google Cloud backbone.
Right.
It starts with Layer 1, tradecraft education. Instead of using a boring, static learning management system where you just click next on a slideshow, they provision dynamic cloud workstation labs.
So if you enroll, you get a safe, ephemeral sandbox to practice actual cyber-physical attack emulation against dummy infrastructure.
So you are practicing the analytical tradecraft synthesizing raw data into verifiable intelligence without falling into cognitive traps in a live environment.
Exactly. But the real magic happens when you scale that up. Once they've trained the individual in that sandbox, how do they train the whole leadership team?
Layer 2.
Right. Layer 2 provides high-ticket consulting via tabletop exercises. And these are tailored specifically for public-private partnerships in lifeline sectors like water, power, and transit.
This is my absolute favorite part. For these tabletop exercises, they use an AI, specifically Notebook LM, as a dynamic white cell, which is the exercise controller.
The AI runs the game.
Right. They feed their threat intelligence into Notebook LM, and during a live simulation with, say, a major transit authority, they prompt the AI to inject real-time variables.
So they'll say, hey, the transit authority just lost telemetry on the eastern grid, generate a credible ransomware note, and the subsequent media fallout.
And the epistemology angle is critical here, right? The goal of that simulation is not just to see if the engineers can reboot the servers.
Not at all. It measures how effectively the C-suite and the engineering teams communicate, share facts, and maintain a shared reality during the chaos.
It's not just about turning the power grid back on. It's about making sure the CEO and the lead engineer are even existing in the same factual reality while the grid is down.
The psychology of that is absolutely fascinating.
It really is. And once KC proves they can facilitate this shared reality, they move to Layer 3, which is becoming a validated information sharing network node.
In Layer 3, CCE transitions from being a consumer of cyber threat intelligence to a validated producer.
Okay.
They create a secured, federated API gateway connected to their single source of truth repositories. Trusted partners can subscribe to curated intelligence feeds using those STIX and TAXC formats we explained earlier.
So Casey essentially becomes the trusted arbiter of truth, establishing the gold standard for social epistemology in the cyber-physical space.
Exactly. But the architecture documents reveal that KCE isn't just a school or a data feed, it is a self-sustaining machine.
Yes. It uses human failure as fuel to get smarter through something called the WIE loop, the wisdom internalization and externalization loop.
This is the ultimate feedback mechanism. It relies on the SCCI and WISED models mentioned in the texts. To put it simply, the SCCI model essentially watches how a human naturally solves a problem or makes a mistake, records those invisible gut instincts, and translates them into hard, readable data rules.
Let's walk through how this loop actually plays out for a student, because it's so cool. Step 1, CCE teaches a concept.
Right.
Step 2, a professional attempts to apply it in their cloud workstation lab and struggles with a specific step. Maybe they misconfigure a firewall.
Okay, then step 3. The system automatically captures the telemetry of that exact friction point.
And step 4, it feeds that failure data back into NotebookLM and updates the Academy's single source of truth.
And finally, this data automatically rewrites the Academy's curriculum so the next student doesn't make that mistake.
That's incredible.
It even triggers new top-of-funnel marketing. It might autonomously generate a YouTube demo or a Substack post explaining that very pitfall, which drives more students into the Academy to learn the newly refined tradecraft.
I mean, think about that for a second. Imagine if every time you misunderstood a concept at your own workplace, your office environment captured that data and automatically rewrote its own training manuals to ensure no one ever made that specific mistake again.
It's turning human friction into institutional wisdom.
Yes.
It creates a fully self-sustaining supply chain that turns raw data into intelligence, intelligence into marketing, and marketing into monetized education, all while actively defending against epistemic collapse.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this deep dive? We've covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with the data scarcity of the Cold War, where intelligence was a linear game of hide and seek. We explored the inversion into data abundance and the paralyzing complexity crisis of open source intelligence.
We unpacked how the IC relies on the inTIME framework, Karl Popper's philosophy, and SecMops to automate the hunt for logical mismatches.
And finally, we saw how KCE uses human failure to power a self-improving educational ecosystem.
The core takeaway here is that epistemic security is no longer just a government problem. The cognitive traps, the data poisoning, the burnout, these apply to any organization and, frankly, any individual trying to navigate today's information landscape.
Exactly. Apply this to your own life. When you consume news, try applying mismatch logic. Stop trying to verify an entire narrative. Just look for the single refuting contradiction.
And in your own work communications, demand the bottom line up front to protect your team's cognitive load.
Before we wrap up, if we look to the future, I know you had one final unexplored concept you wanted to leave everyone with.
I do. We've discussed using automated Popperian logic to hunt for logical mismatches in poisoned data. But what happens tomorrow when adversaries begin using generative AI to perfectly emulate human irrationality?
Oh, man.
Right. If the AI creates flawed data that looks exactly like genuine, everyday human error, will it slip right past our philosophical metal detectors because it's too perfectly imperfect?
Wow. If the counterfeit grain of sand is designed to look perfectly weathered, our metal detector stays completely silent.
Exactly.
And suddenly, we are right back in the diagnostic muddy waters. The X-ray is broken again, and the jagged line is nowhere to be found.
It's a sobering thought.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring and stay insanely curious.